Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us. Thanks for joining me today at the Scottish Summit. I do hope to one day get to the Scottish Summit in person, but this year we're virtual. So thanks again for joining me. For my session, Get Your SQL Server Estate Back in Shape with PowerShell. This is me. My name is Jess Pomfret. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a database engineer and a Microsoft MVP. I'm also an open source contributor. I've contributed to DBA Tools, DBHX, and some resources for the SQL Server DSC module. I am passionate about automation, proper football, and fitness. And the most important thing on this slide is my Twitter handle at @jpomfret. If you have any questions after the session, feel free to reach out to me there. I'll also provide my email address later on if you want to get in contact. First things first, I want to give a call out and thank all of our sponsors for the Scottish Summit. Without them, this event would not be possible. So please make sure that you go and check out their virtual booths. Virtual conferences are really hard for sponsors. So it's important that we try and make it as easy as possible for them and take a little time out of our days and out of our conference experience to go check out their booths. You never know when they might be able to offer something that really helps you in a certain situation. So thanks again to our sponsors. And thanks to you for joining me for my session. As I mentioned, this is Get Your SQL Server Estate Back in Shape with PowerShell, and let's get right into it. So we have been gifted this database estate. We walked into our desk on Monday morning. Maybe it's a new job. Maybe it's just our job that we've been at for 2 years, but someone's found 3 servers under someone's desk in a faraway office. We're given this spreadsheet, which is actually quite nice, right? Not always are you given a spreadsheet. Someone just tells you a random server name. But we've been given this spreadsheet of our database estate and asked to make sure that we're in good shape. So we've got 3 servers here, all default instances, which are nice. They're all SQL Server 2017. And then we've got a list of 7 different databases across those SQL servers. But how do we really know whether it's in good shape or not, right? We need to work that out. And the first things first is we need to determine whether they're fit, whether they're in shape. So I want to take this and kind of compare it back to physical fitness. So I've got 2 pictures of 2 athletes here on the screen. They're both pretty fit, right? The person on the left looks like an endurance athlete, maybe a triathlete, maybe a triathlon athlete. The person on the right needs 3 people to spot their back squat, so definitely strong. I would argue that both people are fit, but if we swap them around, they're not going to perform as well in the other discipline as they do in their own discipline, right? So what we need is a fitness test that measures things across multiple domains and gives us kind of one score to see whether they're fit or not, right? So going along with this physical fitness idea, we would need to develop a fitness test that goes across these domains. So we could have something that tests strength, perhaps a 1-rep max bench press, something that tests endurance, perhaps a 10K run. And then I've got a flexibility test and an explosive power test. And together, those 4 things kind of test all different aspects of fitness and will give us kind of who's the overall fittest or overall are you fit. This idea for this session kind of came to me one day when I was looking at my Crossfit Score. So as I mentioned, I'm into fitness and I use an app called Beyond the Whiteboard to track all of my workouts. And you can see here that they do basically the same thing, right? Every time I log a workout, it rates it into one of these categories and then rates my score against everyone else's score on the website. And basically shows me my strengths and weaknesses, or if I have any gaps. The obvious gap on this slide is I have no data for the heavy segment. I'm living in the UK and we've been under lockdown for much of this year, and so heavy lifting has not been something that's been easy to do. But here you can see I've got a good overall score of 78, and there are some ups and downs depending on what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. So what we need is something similar to this idea for our SQL servers. Then once we have this kind of data, we'll be able to see where things need to be improved. So let's come up with a SQL Server fitness test. Again, we're going to want to test it across multiple disciplines. And here I've created just 4 categories that we can look at. Security, and a couple of tests that we can look at. Is the SA account disabled? Do we have guest access? And then performance. Auto shrink, auto close, those settings we know affect performance, and then our VLF count. If our transaction logs are fragmented, we're going to see potentially our performance impact. In the maintenance category, we need to look at backups. Are we taking regular backups, and do we have all of the backups we need to meet our recovery point objectives? Check DB, another really important one. Are we checking to make sure we're not corrupt or our databases are healthy? Then I've left the business specific one kind of open. We're not going to hit on that for today's demos, but you could slot anything you needed in there. Perhaps you have rows that need to get downstream to a different system in X number of minutes. You could measure that, right? Or perhaps there needs to be less than X rows in the staging table at any one time. This fitness test should be really what you need, right? The things that are important to you in each category, and you can make this as complicated or as simple as you want. The nice thing is we already kind of have this fitness test with DBHX, and we'll get into what DBHX is in a minute, but I wanted to show you this screenshot and kind of compare that back to my Beyond the Whiteboard physical fitness screenshot, right? You can see here we've got some servers on the left, MS SQL 1, 2, and 3 with different numbers of failed tests. In the middle, we've got some labels with our categories and whether things are failing or passing in those different categories. And then we've got an overall score. Our passed percentage is 67%, basically almost 68%. So DBHX. DBHX is just a combination of DBA Tools and Pester. So let's break that down a second. Hopefully you've all heard of DBA Tools. If you haven't, please reach out to me. I would love to get you hooked up. It saves me time literally every day. But DBA Tools is an open source module for making database administration tasks easy. It's basically like command line SSMS, Management Studio. If you can do it in Management Studio, you can probably do it in DBA Tools. The power is you can handle multiples really easy. So in Management Studio, I may want to just check on whether auto-close is enabled for one of my databases. I'm going to right-click on that database, go to Properties, check the property, and then move on to the next one, right? I could write it in T-SQL, but again, I'm kind of pigeonholed to just one server there. With DBA Tools, I can pass in a whole list of servers, a whole list of databases, and say, go get me the auto-close property for all of these. And it'll come back and provide me an object that I can work with in PowerShell. It's really powerful. I highly recommend jotting that down if you have not heard of DBA Tools. So DBHX, we take DBA Tools and we combine it with Pester. Pester is a testing framework. It's written in PowerShell, but it is written as a domain-specific language. What that means is it's like PowerShell, but it has its own kind of keywords and terms built in. It's mainly used for unit and integration testing for your code. Basically, you set up these tests, and then when you change anything in your code, you can make sure you didn't break anything, right? The functionality is still the same. But you can basically use it for anything that you can say true or false, right? This should be that, or this should not be that. And you can use Pester to build a framework around those. So DBHX does just that. It takes the powerful commands from DBA Tools to check different things in your environment, and then it pushes it through Pester and gives you the output that you can see in the bottom half of the screen. Green means good, or the little plus sign means good. Red text or the minus sign means not so good. And you can see here it's describing database collation. It's going to go through and make sure that the database collation matches that of my server collation. We don't have any mismatches. And you can see my important AppDB does have a mismatch in collation that we'll want to take a look at. So let's go and take a look at how DBHX works, how we can get it installed, and we'll run our baseline fitness test that we just described. All right, so first things first, we need to get hold of the module, right? DBHX is an open source module. The code is on GitHub, and it is published to the PowerShell gallery. What that means is we can install it using install module DBHX, and it'll pull down the latest module from the gallery and install it on our local machine. If we want to use the module on a machine that is not connected to the internet, we can do save module DBHX to a path, obviously from a machine that is connected to the internet, and then we can copy that module folder out to wherever we need it, perhaps into our database environment. Once we have the module, we're going to run import module DBHX to just bring it into our session. Let's get rid of that. And a couple of things before we get started. PowerShell loves to teach you, and this is one of the things I love most about PowerShell. There are 3 commands that you should just keep track of, and one of them is get command. What get command does, if we pass in a module, It tells us all of the functions and pieces that are inside that module. So here you can see for DBHX, we've got a bunch of different functions that we can use. Not as many as DBA Tools. If you run this for DBA Tools, you get like 500, 600 different functions. DBHX just has a few functions because the power of DBHX is actually in the pester tests rather than the functions. So to build on get command, DBHX has built its own kind of helpful command into it, get dbcheck. All of the DBHX commands and functions start with dbc, so you know which module they came from. So let's run get dbcheck. A lot just went by, right? There are a ton of checks in here that we can use to configure and check on all kinds of different things in our environment. We can also pass in parameters. So get dbcheck group agent will just give us the checks that are relevant to the SQL Server agent. We can also use a pattern if we wanted to find checks that related to owners, perhaps database owners or job owners. And there are also tags. So tags are used within DBHX to get real specific. Okay, you can each check has its own unique tag. So for example, disk capacity, I'm only going to get one tag back, and I've formatted this as a list so you can see all of the output. Checks do have multiple tags. So like for backups, there is a last full backup just to get the specific test for last full backups. But there's also a tag for last backup if you want fulls, diffs, and transaction log backup checks. You can check these out as you're working through using get dbcheck. You can see the unique tag for this one is disk capacity, and then there are some all tags, which mean you can hit this to get groups of tests. The other thing to know when we look at the disk capacity check is this config property. dbchecks is using PS framework under the covers to set and get configuration properties. And we can use get dbc-config to kind of take a look at all of the things we can configure. And again, like dbcheck, this brought back a ton of information. So we're going to need a way of filtering it. And we can do that with the name property parameter. So get dbc-config name skip. These are all of the things that we can just set flags, true or false, to skip different tests. We'll take a look at skipping some of these later, or changing the value of these. For example, skip security essay exists. If this is true, it's going to skip the check for a login named essay for it not existing. So you can turn those bits on and off depending on what you want to test in your environment. If you want to get a specific value, like when we were looking at the disk capacity test check, it has policy disk space percent free. And if we run that, you can see it's currently set at 20%. Basically, that means that this check is going to make sure you have 20% free on all of your disks. If for some of my disks that's no good, I want to check for 10%, I can use set dbc-config and change that value across the board to 10%. There are some ways to get more granular with this. We can talk about that outside of the session. It's a little bit outside the scope for today, but there is a way to get more granular. Once we've finished messing up the config in this example, I'm going to go ahead and set us back with reset dbc-config. This is just going to put us right back to the default. So if you get into a state where you're like, man, I've changed a lot of things and that is not what I want, reset dbc-config will get you right back to where you were. All right, so we've got the module. We know how to explore it and how to use PowerShell to see what we've got available. Let's go ahead and run some checks, okay? So the most simple thing you can do with DBHX, and I use this quite often just on a day-to-day basis to just check one-off things, is you can use invoke dbcheck, pass in a SQL instance, and a specific check. So in this case, I'm saying MS SQL 1 is my instance. I want to just make sure the database status is good. They're online. They're not auto-closed. They're not in a state that I'm not expecting, right? And you can see I've got 7 passed tests and 1 failed. And if I come up here to the minus sign and red text, you can see that important app db2 does not pass this database status text. And if you read the next line, it's saying that it auto-closed basically existed. This database is in auto-close mode, and we expected none to be in auto-close. So right off the bat, I can see very quickly that that server has a problem, right? I can also pass in multiple checks and multiple machine names. So here I'm passing in MS SQL 1 and MS SQL 2, and I'm going to check database status, but I'm also going to add on the page verify check. Invoke dbcheck is basically a wrapper around invoke pester. So a lot of the things that are available on invoke pester are also available or exposed through invoke dbcheck. One of those is the show property. And basically what that does is it's only going to show me the fails. Sometimes if you run a lot of tests, the fails are going to get lost in that green text or the good stuff, right? I really only care about what's not good. So in this case, you can see a few things are popping up. The important app DB is auto-closed, which we knew. But if we scroll up, you can also see that on MS SQL 1, I've got a database that has page verify set. It's not set at all. It's set to none. We expected to check some. So you can see I've got 2 issues now that I need to take a look at. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the most simple version of the DBHX dashboard. So this is version 1. It takes the checks that we are running. So we're running what we just ran, page verify and database status. We're then piping it through to update the DBC Power BI data source. And what that is a JSON file. I've tagged it with the environment test, and then I've run start DBC Power BI. And you can see now that Power BI is starting to load. And once that loads, it's going to have a dashboard based off of that JSON file that we just created. So this is a good way of running a few tests, not persisting the information in a database or anything, but being able to get a quick view. And when we come in here, we just need to refresh to pick up the JSON file. I'll minimize these to make it a bit smaller. Cool. And you can see here that I've got a pretty simple dashboard, but very easily I can see I've got a couple of failures, mostly success. And if I click on these, it'll be filtered across the whole board. And you can see that database important app DB has the expected state. So we know the database status is no good. We also have a page verify issue too. This is version 1 of the dashboard. I don't use this anymore because we have version 2, which we'll get to now, but it is a good way of just seeing what's available and quickly creating a dashboard. So version 2 of the dashboard, and you need DBHX version 2.0 or higher for this. You can take those same checks and then use convert DBC result with a label, which we'll look at in a minute, and then pipe that to write DBC table. What this is going to do, and I'll kick it off and I'll talk you through it, we're going to run the tests, and in this case, I'm running last full backup against my two my two SQL servers. I'm going to create a DBC result that's labeled DBHX Jess, and then I'm going to write them into this table. This is the destination, right? MS SQL 1, database admin, database, backup checks, database, table, sorry. The tests have all passed, and I'll come across here. And if I just run this select statement in Azure Data Studio from backup checks, you can see basically the same results in my database table. Here's my label so that we can group things. Last full backup times. And over here, you can see any that have failed. So database admin should have full backups less than 1 day old. Again, that's all configurable. We'll come over here and we'll see the actual value. And if we open this up, we'll just copy it out. You can see that it expected the value to be greater than this timestamp, which is 1 day ago, because taking backups is important. But we got no date, which means that this database has never had a backup. Cool. So that is storing DBHX data in our database. It's a really great way of keeping track of results in your database, and so you can monitor whether you're getting healthier or moving away from the desired state, right? So that is basically our introduction to DBHX. We're going to run our baseline test. I knew that. Okay. So let's move on to the second part of the demo. Here I'm going to import DBHX. It's already imported, but there's no harm in re-importing it. I have 3 SQL instances, and I'm basically going to run this, and then we'll talk through it, okay? So I'm just going to select all of this. Okay, I'm not going to start Power BI because I already have it open. We'll just refresh it. But let's talk through it. So I have set up 3 sets of checks here, and the reason will become apparent in a second. But these are the things that we saw in our SQL Server fitness test. Our security checks. We're going to do XP command shell disabled, guest user connect, SA disabled, and look for any orphaned users. In our performance checks, we'll do auto close, auto shrink, and then that virtual log file fragmentation. And then for maintenance, we'll do backups, check DBs, and to see whether the Ola Hallengren solution is installed. I've then created this hash table for my DBA Tools destination. We're going to use that to splat the results into the database. We'll see that in just a second. Then I have my two set DBC configs. So these are the things that I mentioned earlier, the option to turn things on and off. These are turned off by default, and we want to turn them on. So we want to not skip SA disabled or guest user connect checks. All right, so here we have our three sets of checks, and I'm doing it in 3 groups so that I can use the label to kind of categorize them. These are all going to look very similar. We're going to invoke DBC check against our SQL instances for security checks, or perf checks, or maintenance checks. Those will then be passed through to convert DBC result with a certain label, so security, performance, maintenance, and then we'll write them out. And here's our hash table, which is this is PowerShell splatting. It's just a different way of writing it. I could list out the 3 parameters here over and over again, but this is much cleaner. So once this is run, and you can see it's just finished, I've got 17 pass tests, 37 failed tests. And I can look at the output on the screen. I could go through that. But since we pushed it into the database, if I open up this Power BI dashboard and I refresh it, it'll grab the data out of the database and create this fitness dashboard for us. Cool. So I'm recording this on February 14th, which is why the date is not the date that you're seeing this video. And here is our fitness score, 67.91. That's the number we're going to want to remember, and we'll come back to make sure we're getting fitter later on in the session. This dashboard makes it really easy for you to get a quick view on where your biggest problems are, right? Here you can see MS SQL 1 has 18 failed tests, MS SQL 3 has 14, and MS SQL 2 has 11. If you come into the middle, and we can minimize these to kind of make them easier to see, you can see that each of my fitness test groups has a score overall, right? So my maintenance is only at 31% passed. That's pretty bad. But performance-wise, I'm at 93%. So I'm looking much stronger in that area, right? If I highlight the maintenance tests, the whole of the dashboard will be filtered to just that group. So here you can see that the good last good check DB has a lot of failed tests. Last full backup times, I've got a lot of problems. And I've got some missing Ola Hallengren solutions. There are also other tabs here, and we'll come back to look at date a little bit later, but let's look at databases. Here you can see the database with the most failures. So if I wanted to really focus in and make sure that my databases were getting fitter, I would take a look at AdventureWorks, and I can filter by that down here. And I can see the different checks that have failed and passed and the different dates. On this latest tab, you can also drill through. So if I want to right-click on last full backup times, I can choose drill through, and it'll take me through to the drill through tab for just backup times. And then I can filter again by just failed if I want to get like an output of all of the failed backup tests. Cool. So this was us creating this is us running our baseline fitness test, right? Whenever we're talking about fitness and improving it, we need to have where we are now so that we can know where we're going to get to, right? So fitness test, we're at 67%. Once we got our fitness score, we need to do our training plan, right? Now, if we go back to the physical fitness examples from before, this could be like our Couch to 5K. If I've never run a 5K and I want to, there's a program called Couch to 5K that basically takes you through gradually building up from running a bit and walking a bit to running a 5K. Same thing with marathon training, right? I can't go out and just run a marathon. I mean, I could try, but I don't think it would go very well. So what you need is some kind of training plan, some kind of plan to get you to the end goal. How are we going to get from here to there? And we need the same thing for our SQL Server training plan. This is going to look a little different, right? I don't need to go running or jogging for this, but I need to gain approval. Perhaps there's downtime to fix some of these issues, so I need to organize that. There's probably a change management process, that kind of stuff. I also need to write the scripts, test them, get them approved and ready to go, right? So with any training plan, we need to kind of break it down and make sure we're doing it in small, manageable chunks. If you're doing Agile or something similar to this would be like a sprint plan. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to identify the scope, the issues, and our next steps to fix, to make this better. So here you can see I've got my dashboard just to remind us about our maintenance problem, right? Maintenance was our lowest score across the 3 categories, so that's where we're going to dive into first because that's where the low-hanging fruit is. You can see that my maintenance score is 31%. My top issues are that Ola Hallengren isn't installed and that we don't have good check DBs or last full backups that meet our requirements. For the scope of this, I'm going to hit all 3 instances. If I have 400 instances, I'm probably not going to do them all at once. Perhaps I'd break it into like non-production and production, or break it into different application teams to make the downtime easier. Then we need to define the plan, right? What's our next step? To fix these solutions, we're going to install Ola's maintenance solution. Once I've installed that, it'll make it really easy for us to get backups and check DB back on track. So that is our training plan for SQL Server Fitness. Now, I should have mentioned this earlier in the session, but if you do have any questions, I'm in the chat right now. Feel free to drop them in and I'll answer them as we're going. Hopefully, I've already reminded you of that. But let's go ahead. Now we've got our training plan. We know what we need to do. How do we get fixing it? This is where DBA Tools comes in. So dbachecks we used to create our dashboard and our fitness test. That really helped us see what we needed to fix. Now we need to do the work. We're going to ask DBA Tools for help. As I mentioned, it's perfect for handling multiples, right? We can easily hit all 3 of these database servers and install Ola's maintenance solution. We can also easily kick off SQL agent jobs across all of our environment at once if we want to. The other benefit that I think is really worth mentioning here is it's perfect for fixing issues with code. I am a big fan of infrastructure as code and kind of keeping those scripts that we've ran. First of all, it's now documented exactly what I did. If someone comes and says, whoa, what happened on this date? I can say, this is the script I ran, this is the output, this is what happened. It means it's repeatable, right? If I have 400 servers to run through and I'm doing this in 5 batches, I can write the script one time, pass in different servers, different properties, and rerun this throughout my environments. It's making it a lot easier for me. I have to do this work one time, basically, and then just run it 5 times. We can also keep this in source control, right? As I mentioned, we can say this is what I did on that date. Well, if that script is changing over time, you can go back in time in source control and say this is what that script was on this date, right? This is what's changed. This is who changed it. We can go ask them what happened. Really powerful ideas for infrastructure as code there. Okay, so what we're going to do, and we're going to jump into the demo here, is we're going to install Ola's maintenance solution across our entire environment. And then we're going to kick off some SQL agent jobs to try and improve our maintenance health. So let's jump back over here to my demo environment and let's come to my maintenance demo. For this example, we are going to import the DBA Tools module. Now it is already imported because DBHX relies on it. And when we imported DBHX, it brought the modules it needed to run in. I've got 3 SQL instances, right? MS SQL 1, MS SQL 2, and MS SQL 3. So I'm going to store those in a variable. I'm then going to run just my invoke dbcheck for just my maintenance to show my fails. We're going to take a quick look at the pest output and just see where we're at. And as this runs by, we are seeing a lot of red, right? We know that already. Our score was only 31% for maintenance, which was really poor. And here you can see we've got 14, it took 14 seconds to run those. And these are our results. We'll paste them in here just to keep track. I got 17 pass fails, 17 pass tests, and 37 fails. That's what we're trying to improve. As I mentioned already, get command is the PowerShell version of show me what commands are in this module. DBA Tools has written their own, which is find DBA command, which is a little more powerful. So get command only looks at the name of the functions. Get DBA command, find DBA command looks through all of the comment-based help, of which DBA Tools is really good. There is always great help in those DBA Tools commands. And it's basically going to look for Ola across all of the help. And when we can run through here, we'll see some that are not so useful. But if we get to this one, install DBA maintenance solution, download and install SQL Server maintenance solution created by Ola Hallengren. That is what we want. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 commands that are really useful for exploring PowerShell. Get command was one of them. Get help is the other one, is the second one. Get member is the third one. That tells you what you can do with the function once you have it, or what you can do with an object, sorry. We're not going to touch on that one today, but definitely go read up if you're not familiar. So get help was our second one. What we're going to do here is we're going to pass that install DBA maintenance solution function name into get help and use the show window parameter. That is my favorite parameter for get help, because what it does is it pops up a separate window. If I zoom in, you should be able to read this, and it is searchable. So if I type a word in here, it highlights it throughout the documentation. But what you can see here is we've got a bit of a short description. It's going to do exactly what we need. It will get the latest version and install it on our SQL servers. It goes through all the different parameters that we can use, where we want to store our backups, where the solution should be installed, all of these things that you can read through. And if we come to the bottom, there are a bunch of examples of how you can use this function straight away. All right, so we are going to, what the other benefit of this is completely separate to my console window. I can come back here, write my code, and keep this help open and refer back to it if I need it. All right, so install DBA maintenance solution. We're going to use splatting again to keep our code nice and clean. So here is my SQL instances I'm going to pass in. I'm setting install jobs to true to basically install the jobs. And I'm setting log to table true too. If you're not familiar with Ola's solution, anytime it runs a command, if you have log to table turned on, it will put that result into a table by default in the database that you installed the solution into. By default, I'm not defining that, so it's going to go into the master database, but you can just as easily put that somewhere else. I'm also going to install the entire solution. So the values here, you can pass in all, which is full solution, or you can do just backups, just integrity checks, or index optimize if you want. So let's go ahead and kick this off. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through all three of my servers. Well, first of all, it's going to download the maintenance solution from the internet. If you are not on a box with internet access, there is a parameter for using a local file. So you do the same thing, right? You download it yourself, get it over to your jump box or wherever you're running this code from, and then use that file, which is also a good way of controlling that you get the version you expect, because obviously Ola could have upgraded something today, and I just pulled down that new code that I haven't personally tested. So, okay, you can see the results have come back. I've got success for all three of my instances, which now means Ola Hollingren's solution is installed and ready to go. So let's take a look at Get DBA Agent Job. What this is going to do is exactly what it says in the name. It is going to get all of the SQL Agent jobs from our servers in the category database maintenance. So this is the SQL Agent Job category. And then I'm using outgrid view with pass-through. Let me show you what that does. Get DBA Agent Job is going to return an object, right? It's going to be piped through this pipeline into outgrid view. You can see it flashing down here. And this is popping up. I can make it a little bigger for you. As it's going, it is getting all of the jobs and filling in the information into this outgrid view. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's an OK button. Pass-through means whatever I select from this outgrid view and then press OK, those will be passed through the pipeline again to whatever's next. And you can see whatever I have next is Start DBA Agent Job. So what we've done is create basically a little GUI showing me all of the database maintenance jobs on our servers, and then we're going to run whichever ones we want across multiple servers. So let's take a look at backups, right? I think we want full backups. Let's do full. And you can see for each server, here's the MS SQL ones. We've got system database full backups and user database full backups. If I select all 6 of these, so that's 2 jobs per server across 3 servers, and you can see these have never run before, press OK. Those will get passed along the pipeline, and Start DBA Agent Job is going to kick them off. The output you're seeing down here is just that the job has successfully been kicked off. We're not waiting for them to finish. If you wanted to do that, you would need to build in some logic to check on the progress of that job. So all of our jobs have kicked off, and our environment is not that big, so it's not going to take that long for our jobs to run and our backups to be complete. Let's do the same thing for our integrity checks. Now for this, instead of using outgrid view, which is obviously great if I'm sat there manually working on this, if we want to do it more programmatically, we can use the where object to filter just our jobs that are database integrity check, pipe them to Start DBA Agent Job, and then pipe that again to select object. I just want to see the SQL instance and the name of the job that's been kicked off. Again, the output here is just as the job's been kicked off, not as the job has completed. Here you can see my jobs are kicking off. We should have all of our backup jobs run one time. Sorry, all of our full backup jobs run one time, and all of our DBC check DBs run one time. As I said, our environment isn't that big. These jobs don't take very long to complete, so let's go ahead and rerun our maintenance checks and just see where we stand. Now, while that's running, I did actually need to come back to Azure Data Studio, and I'm going to go ahead and update our baseline fitness test results to backdate them one day. The dashboard for DBHX is limited to only showing you results for one time per day at the moment. So just to be able to show you where we were and where we got to, I just want to set that date back. Okay, so our checks have run. Let's scroll back up to see where we were before. We were at 17 passed and 37 failed. You can now see I'm at 54 passed, 0 failed. Our maintenance is in a much better spot. Cool. Okay, let's rerun our health check. I'm just going to grab all of this again and kick this off. This will take a couple of minutes to run. So while that is running, feel free to hit me up in the comments for any questions at this point, any ideas you have, whether you think that this would be useful in your environments. I can tell you in my current environments, we have this set up as like a morning health check. Across our environment, we check different things like backups that we expected to have run, database status, and those are like, and a few other important things that we want to just get a good view on in the morning. That runs at 6:45. When I log in at 8ish, that job is done, and I can pull up the dashboard and have a quick view to see if there are any issues from overnight. Have I got any failed backups? Is there a database offline that I wasn't expecting? And again, slightly outside of this scope, but there are ways to overwrite some of those things. The config properties for database status, you can pass in a list of databases that you expect to be read-only or you expect to be offline, so you can kind of handle your environment. Obviously, not every environment is going to be 100% available and 100% online, so you can kind of handle that. As you can see, my pester tests are running. I feel like I'm getting a lot more green now since we fixed those maintenance problems, but obviously we do still have some other problems. Let me see, is that the last one? No, now it's doing the maintenance. And once this runs, we'll go back to our dashboard and we'll see how we're looking. The other nice thing about DBHX is there are, as I mentioned, tons of checks available. You can also write your own checks and implement them in. So don't tell anyone, but we have some Oracle servers in our environment at work, and we've written some pester tests that check in on certain Oracle things. Like there's a particular drive that we care about. We can check in on the status there. We can write some things that log into Oracle and check certain things. DBHX can then be configured to run those Oracle checks too. So it's not just for SQL Server. You can make this exactly what you need in your environment. Okay. This was our maintenance test again. As we know, there's 54 passed now. Let's come back over to our version 2 dashboard. We were at 67.91% before we started working on our maintenance. Let's go ahead and refresh this from the database. As I mentioned, I backdated this result to be yesterday, so we can see the difference over time. But look at that, our pass percentage is now 95%. That feels good, right? We've got a measurable change in our environment that we can say, all right, we've improved things. We're getting fitter, we're getting healthier. If I come over to the date tab, you can see that this is the number of passed tests, and then the orange line is the number of failed. We had 37 fails yesterday, or when we ran it earlier today, and now we're down to just, well, this says 0. Oh, I've got maintenance selected. Here we go. Let's unselect that. All of these options on the dashboard configure all of the other visualizations. So we started off here with 43 failed. Now I filtered it again by failed. That's all right. And we've ended with just 6 failed, which is our 95% score. You can see easily where they are. All of the maintenance ones are now resolved. We've got some SA logins, some auto close, some auto shrinks that need to be resolved. So this is a really powerful way of checking our estate. Maybe it's a new estate, maybe it's just something we want to implement now in our current estate. Fixing some things, rerunning this, and seeing that we've got fitter, we've got healthier. And this is a really great thing to take back to management too, right? And show that the work you're doing is valuable and is getting us to a better state. All right, let's pop back to the presentation for our final few minutes. So just to summarize, and this is bright, this presentation has basically been kind of a cycle that we can run over and over again, right? We're going to decide on what's important in our environment. What do we care about when we talk about SQL Server Estate, shape, or fitness? We're then going to use DBHX to run some tests and see where we are now. We're going to get that initial baseline fitness score, and then we're going to use DBA Tools to go through and fix those issues. Once we get to the bottom, we're probably going to go back to the top, decide on new metrics, and incrementally make our environment better over and over again. If you've liked these examples and these demos, they are all available on my GitHub. They're in the J Pomfret is my GitHub name, and they're in a demos repo there. This will take you right to this particular presentation's demos, and they are all available now. One other slide of resources. The official documentation for DBHX has a ton of information in there, and the DBHX repo on GitHub is a great place to go also to get information about the module. I've added 2 blogs on here, Rob Sewell and Claudio's. They talk a ton about DBHX, and if you want to go check out some things they're doing with running in parallel, with configuration, Rob does a bunch of stuff with pipelines and running Pester and stuff. There's a bunch of great information out there. I highly recommend checking out those blogs. Then finally, if you want to get in contact with the DBHX or DBA Tools teams, they are on Slack and on Twitter. Reach out. They love to hear feedback, and they love to help people get more familiar with these modules and make it more useful in your everyday environment. Finally, we have a few minutes left over for questions. I am in the live chat, so hopefully you've been asking questions and we've been answering them as we go. But if you have any final questions, please do jot them down, write them down, and I'll answer them right now. If you think of questions later on when you're about to go to sleep and you're just thinking about DBHX, please feel free to email me or reach out on Twitter. I've also included my blog at jesspomfret.com and my GitHub repo where you can get these demos and any of the other demos I've got available on there. Finally, thank you again for attending my session and for being at the Scottish Summit. As I mentioned, I really do hope to get there physically one time, but this has been a great event, and I'm really enjoying hanging out with everyone in the chat. So enjoy the rest of the conference. This session recording will be uploaded to YouTube after 14 days. So if you want to have another look at it, or if you want to share it with anyone, please do. Again, thanks for joining. Have a great conference.